I'm 55, I'm post-divorce, I'm menopausal, and I'm in a tattoo parlor about to get my first tattoo. I know, Jews don't get tattoos, and nice Jewish girls from New Jersey especially.
My name is Jeff Israel. I live in Bristol, Connecticut, and I'm a second generation survivor. Both of my parents are survivors. Two very different stories. My mom lived through Kristallnacht, and 3 months later was able to get passage to the United States. And my grandmother and dad were taken to Auschwitz.
So my name is Eliane Felicite Adamski, and I'm Eliane Sandler. I'm probably the oldest of the second gens. I was born in 47. My mother was born in 28. So when she was deported with her mother and her father, she was deported to Theresienstadt in Czech Republic, and so she was like 14. And my mother then went with her mother. When they arrived at Auschwitz, they were lined up, and my mother was chosen to go one way, and my grandmother was chosen to go the other way. It's called the selection, and my grandmother went up into the gas chamber, and my mother was sent somewhere else to work, to labor camp.
When people ask me about, am I different, I realize the things that my parents said to me growing up, but didn't explain it, that I was different. I am different. And originally I always talked about my parents' story and what they did and things that they went through. But then I started telling my own story through this group of Voices of Hope. It's a time that we go through, it's called Speak Up. We actually learn to tell our own stories, and I think it kind of jogs us away from what happened to our parents and what that means in growing up in a household of survivors.
My name is Eileen Minella, and I am a psychotherapist, or as my kids like to say, a psychotherapist. Voices of Hope is a group for second generation, which is what we're called, children of Holocaust survivors. So we've collaborated with Speak Up. We are about 7 or 8 children, adult children of survivors, and we'll be telling our story, and we each have a different story. I've always thought of myself as a little different and have had a different journey and a different baggage that I carry in my heart.
Voices of Hope came to us and asked if they saw this as something that we could do. Could we take the children of Holocaust survivors and teach them to tell a story that isn't necessarily a history of the survivor, of their parent, but instead a story about themselves that also reveals something about their parent in the process.
My name is Minna Nemero. I live in West Hartford, Connecticut. My father was born in what was Belarus, Russia. He grew up in a small town called Kurnitz, and he survived with his parents living in the woods of Belarus for 2 years.
So one thing that I've noticed over time of working with these, this is now our 4th group, and we've seen people mention that their parents have had feelings that their experience was not as bad as someone else's experience, or they were hiding in the woods, or they were hiding in a convent, and they weren't in a concentration camp.
My father, he kind of almost downplayed his experience or minimized it because he never really felt like he had a story. I didn't really feel that he was a Holocaust survivor.
There's a lot of that idea that if your experience wasn't the most horrific possible, then perhaps our stories aren't worthy to be told.
And we've seen it where people wonder whether they belong in this group telling their stories of being the children of survivors. And I do think that this group has been really helpful for people to realize that there's a huge spectrum of experiences, and what makes somebody a Holocaust survivor is not just one single thing, that there are many, many different experiences that people had, and they were all super valid.
I feel like so much of my life is a part of my dad's life, and I'm really proud to get up on the stage and speak, and my dad will be there.
This opportunity to speak, it's the opportunity to honor my father and to spread his story, further.
It's a lovely fall Sunday morning about 5 years ago, and my 82-year-old father, Marvin, or Mendel, is telling his survival story to my 12-year-old daughter's Hebrew school class. And I'm sitting at the back of the class listening to stories I've heard many times through the years and thinking about how these kids are really just about the age my father was during the war.
Within the next decade, I think my grandchild will be the last generation that can actually speak to a Holocaust survivor, which is sad in many respects, but one big one is that the deniers will, all of a sudden, they won't have anybody to come up and say it did happen. So it's important for second generation, hopefully third generation, my grandchildren, fourth generation, know about it and speak freely about it.
I think, yes, we all have an obligation to speak up, especially now. There are people being killed for their religion, for their race, for their beliefs. I find it sickening, I find it sad, and ultimately, I really don't get it. I don't get hatred.
What happened last summer, I think, shook a lot of people. To see an American woman on the streets of America killed by Nazis, and then them marching with torches, and it's unfathomable. I can't think of how that could happen here. And I get broken up when I talk about it.
I hold my breath and I hope that my mother didn't read the paper. I feel very protective because imagine what it's like to have gone through what they did and it's not over. It didn't end it. People didn't learn.
And the sad part is that even as we live today, I believe there's 5 active genocides going on.
Voices of Hope, Speak Up was very unique for me. It gave me a lot more courage to get in people's faces and just remind them about what happened and who it happened to.
Before Speak Up, I was my father, I was my mother, I was my grandparents, and I realized I have an identity too, and here I am over 50 years later, waking up to the fact that this did happen, and it's important for me to tell that story, my story.
It's winter 2018. I'm in Fair Lawn, New Jersey. I'm still 55. I'm still, divorced. I'm still menopausal. And I asked my dad, Dad, what was it like when you got your tattoo in Auschwitz? And my dad says, what? And I said, what was it like when you got your tattoo in Auschwitz? And my dad said, Eileen, in that moment, I don't remember. I don't know where I was. I don't remember who I was. I don't remember what I was. My dad may not have known who he was, but I have always known who my father is. He is a man of deep integrity, amazing kindness, generosity, and love. And he's here today. Just give a wave, Willie. Give a wave. Thank you.